right, welcome back to Rick and Elaine Discuss the Bible. I've got my friend Elaine Ray Clark. Good morning, Elaine.
Good morning, Rick. How are you with your little cup? Was it peace, love, and joy?
Peace, love,
Absolutely.
and joy. And if you look
Yep.
really, really close, you'll see Snoopy. Snoopy is on there from Peanuts.
Does he bring a lot of love, peace, and joy?
Well, he's just a funny little character, you know.
Oh, bless him.
But yeah, so you and I last week when we were talking, we decided to get into the book of Job. And Job is such a fascinating story. It seems to just come out of nowhere and it just pops up, in the Old Testament. And you're like, what is this? And so we've been talking back and forth, and I put together a little something, but before I get that little something out, why don't you give me some of your thoughts about the book, just in general?
Well, the thing is, like we were just saying, that it's a book that really, like you say, pops up, and I think they say that it's the earliest one that was written. It was
Hmm.
the first one that was written, and what gets to you is that there's nothing there about the nation of Israel, nothing at all, and yet this man that we know only the story of what's gone on here, the suffering of him and the final sort of, the vindication of God's sovereignty triumphing over sort of a misconstrued idea of what's going on, actually, that you sort of think to yourself, well, it's very, very exhaustive in its poetic aspect, but it's so filled with this love for God and this going backwards and forwards about what he thinks about himself, what he's done. Then you get these comforters that aren't really comforters. They turn out to be sort of people that really are just oppressing him.
Hmm.
And yet he's there. He is maintaining these things, and he's going over all these things. He's saying these things out loud, and there's this sort of this backwards and forwards between them, and it just is amazing to see for me how Job sort of starts to wake up.
Hmm.
He
Yeah,
starts to
that's a good
wake.
way to put it. Hmm.
Yeah, he does start to wake up. It's not all about do's and don'ts, whys and can'ts and whatever,
Hmm.
which obviously he did all those things, which it says at the beginning, he was a very good like priest of his family.
Hmm.
But at the end, it's beyond that.
Hmm. It
Because I
is, and
think
it.
he just turns around and says at the end, it's basically, I haven't just heard him, I've seen him.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And so let's do this. Let's jump in. I'm going to go into this email that I sent you where I was doing some research. And so I want to give you guys who are going to study this book with us this background. So the historical background of Job, first of all, Job is set in a pre-Mosaic patriarchal world. There's like Elaine said, there's no mention of Israel, the Exodus, the law, priests, or prophets.
No.
Job acts as his own family priest, which is a patriarchal feature. Wealth is measured in livestock, not coinage.
Mm-hmm.
Lifespans match patriarchal longevity. We find that in Job 42. The language of Job contains archaic Hebrew, Aramaic, Akkadian, and
Mm-hmm.
Arabic features. It suggests an early Northwest Semitic cultural environment. I've heard people say that this was from the Orient or from it's a Semitic culture. Story is likely
When
ancient,
you say Semitic culture, what do you mean?
like related to Abraham.
Right.
He was a
Okay. You're not
Semite.
you're
He was
not
a
you're
Semite.
not going back to sort of Shem then. You're not going back to that Semite.
Well, Semitic, yes. From Shem, I would say that
Hmm.
when you say Semitic, this is in my research, they're saying like a Semitic cultural environment. Job kind of reminds me of Jethro, the father-in-law of
Moses,
Moses, because he is he's a priest of El.
Midian.
Um, yep, he's from Midian, but they worship El Shaddai. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and then, okay, so here is Job's relationship to the Hebrews. First, in Job 1:1, it says that he is from the land of Uz. And Uz, this is interesting. Uz is likely associated with Edom, based on
Mm-hmm.
Genesis 36 and Lamentations 4. Job, it doesn't seem like he is a Hebrew or Israelite, but he's probably a Semite, part of the extended Abrahamic world, maybe through Keturah. We'll see. He represents what I believe and what you, I think, believe is that he represents non-Israelite worshipers of Yahweh, like Melchizedek or Jethro.
Yeah, well, prior to God making it a covenant, or first of all, starting with Abraham and then going through sort of Isaac and Jacob and then the 12 tribes.
Exactly. Now, here's something interesting. So Job's friends, the well, the people that come and oppress him, with all of their talk. Eliphaz the Temanite. Well, first of all, Teman is in Edom, so he would be a descendant of Esau.
Yeah.
Bildad the Shuhite. Shua is a son of Abraham and Keturah. Elihu the Buzite, Buz or Buz, whatever, is a descendant of Nahor, which is Abraham's brother. Zophar the Naamatite, they say he's likely from northern Arabia, but that's not proven. And these men come from the world described in Genesis 22 through 36. So it's
And
very fascinating. Go ahead.
can I just say something there? I looked
Yeah.
up the three comforters' names in Hebrew. Now,
Uh-huh.
Eliphaz means El is pure or fine gold,
Oh, wow.
and Bildad means beloved Lord,
Wow.
and Safar means a bird chirping or rising like a sparrow, early rising in the morning.
Really?
Yeah,
Interesting. Did
it's
you look
in
up
it is.
Elihu?
Do you know what? He was the only one I forgot. I looked up Job, and Job is he who weeps, or in some say it's a persecuted or hated. So he who weeps. So therefore, his name actually sort of, complements what he actually did.
Right, right, yeah. So the social world of Genesis 25 through 36 is what we think, where we think this is taking place. And it looks like it's the world of Abraham's extended family branches. So the Edomites show up, the Midianites, the Ishmaelites, the Arameans, tribes
Well,
from
the
Keturah.
Edomites are Esau, aren't they?
That's right, directly from
So therefore,
Esau.
there's a bit of tension there. But
There
they knew the
is.
true God.
Yep, you've got the tribes from Abraham's wife Keturah's sons. And
Hmm.
again, no nation of Israel. There's no nation yet, it doesn't
No.
seem. Tribe-based leadership, nomadic herding, clan alliances. It's a heavy overlap with the world of Genesis 25, 36, and Job. There seems to be an overlap
Well,
there.
it's almost like going from starting with Abraham, like we had the fall, and God says, right now you can have as fallen angels, you can have these nations, and I'm going to
Hmm.
start with this one. So it's almost like there's not. Then there's this sort of like you say this overlap, and then there's the start of where God really brings into His own, like the 12 tribes from Jacob.
Right. Yes. So then I asked the question, well, why is Job in the Bible? Because he's obviously not an Israelite. So if it's a story of Israel, then why is Job in there? And so here's what I think, that it shows that Yahweh Elohim is the God of all nations, not only Israel, that
Mm-hmm.
he demonstrates genuine worship occurring outside of the covenant line, which we knew about Jethro,
Mm-hmm.
provides a template for righteous suffering. It answers some of the universal questions like, why do the righteous suffer? Is God just? How does God rule the world? It showcases God's outreach to the nations long before the New Testament.
Yeah,
There's some
absolutely,
there's some
absolutely.
people that might argue with that, but I would say no. It's showing this here that God is dealing with this person, and it was Satan that brought this about. Quite interesting. And
Well, the thing
Job,
with
go ahead.
No, and I was just thinking as well, like as Abraham was given the sign of circumcision, but Paul makes the point, when was this promise given to him? In circumcision or out of it? So
Hmm.
therefore, already the promise had been given to Abraham
Right.
before circumcision was a sign. So therefore, he was always going to be inclusive of the nations.
Hmm. That's good. Yes, absolutely. Most of the wisdom literature that we find in the Bible is universal in scope, and it really does apply to all humanity. I think that that would be a true statement.
Well, I mean, the thing is, you got to go back to Genesis 3:15.
Hmm.
16, where it says that, he will bruise you in the heel, but you'll bruise him in the head.
Hmm.
And this is the enmity right the way back there. So it has to include everyone. I mean, the blood of righteous Abel. I mean,
Hmm.
was he a Jew? Was he an Israelite? Was he Hebrew? No, he wasn't. He was a
Hmm.
righteous man.
Hmm. That's right. That was pre all of that other stuff. Now, some would
Yeah.
argue that he's still in covenant. They believe that Adam, some people believe Adam was in covenant. I happen to think Adam was in covenant with God. And I think that it descended and was taught to Abel, but not the same. It's not the same as the circumcision of the promise to Abraham. It
I think that,
changes. The administration
yeah,
changes.
I don't know. I can't. The only thing is, I might sort of say on that scale is that that there wasn't any agreement entered into. God actually said to Adam, of every tree in the garden you may eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and bad you must not eat. Otherwise,
Hmm.
if you partake of it, you will surely die.
Hmm.
And it has no sort of, it's a bit like Abraham when God passes through those carcasses. Abraham isn't included in them. The only time that there's an inclusive sort of aspect to a covenant is when the Israelites at Mount Sinai agree to enter into this and they say yes, and there's that covenant arrangement made.
Hmm.
Whereas I mean, if you can enlighten me, I don't know, but I can't see that there's anything. It's usually a spoken, like when you get married, you both
Hmm.
agree to this arrangement, don't you? Where I can't find any agreement to anything.
Well, you know what? As far as the agreement contract, we know that there are times whenever God makes covenants and does it on himself. He makes a covenant with himself for certain things.
Absolutely.
And so I think
Absolutely.
that when he forms Adam from the dust of the ground and he makes him a living soul, and then he takes him and picks him up and puts him into the garden that he had made, that's like him entering into this closer sacred relationship with him.
I think that in itself is true, but at the end of the day, I still can't see where Adam actually sort of enters into himself. You know,
Hmm.
again, he's made outside, placed in there. He's told these things. He has a relationship with God, and he talks to him at the busy part of the day. But I can't see anything in there. It's the same as Abraham. He brought the animals that God told him to and cut them up. But as regards entering into anything, he didn't enter into anything at all. And I'm wondering whether that it's only God that could perform what he was going to perform. It was only going to be through Christ right at the beginning, which is why the covenant, which is why God made basically a covenant, I would
Hmm.
say, with mankind to bring forth this seed that was going to put an end to it. And again, he didn't really agree with anyone. He just said, as God, this is fact. This is what I'm going to do. You
Sure.
know.
And I mean, as far as the word covenant is concerned, I don't think that
Hang on a
even
minute,
shows up.
Rick. Right, sorry,
It's okay.
sorry. Back.
I don't even think that covenant really doesn't show up until you see Noah. Noah's the first time God makes like states this covenant with him. But that, yeah, I mean, we could go on with that for hours, and I have
Yes,
many
yeah,
times with
we
a lot of
go.
people.
Well,
But
yeah.
but all right. So here's something that really was a shock for me when I first read the book of Job. I'm sure it's a shock for everybody, is that the Satan or Hasatan in that
Hmm.
language, which means adversary, in order to understand him, first he's in, if you don't believe in a divine council, then you're going to have to do some work. You're going to have to figure out who these men are if it's not the divine council. I happen to be a divine council person. I believe that there are other
I
gods.
do, I do, I
And
do.
so I think that Satan is fulfilling the role of an accuser in this the gathering of the sons of God, that he is the accuser. The name Satan, it's not a name at this point. It's a role. It's a
Yeah.
function. It's a function. That name shows up all over the Bible.
Yes.
That name, not that name, but the function. It's like David was a Satan at one point. The Philistines were a Satan. They were adversaries,
Yes.
or perhaps an accuser. So at
Yeah.
this point, it's not a personal name. It's just a function. He acts like a prosecuting attorney
Hmm.
in the heavenly courtroom of God at the judgment seat. And, God asks him that question right out of the gate. Where have you been? Oh, I've been to and fro on the earth.
Hmm.
And then he says, have you considered my servant Job? So that function, he's obviously out there trying to consider who he's going to mess with or do or work with to bring to God. And so, but the biggest thing is to understand that the Satan, the Satan in this, he's not an independent cosmic enemy. It's not like you have God over here and then Satan's over here and they're just war. No, Satan is being used by God. He only
Hmm.
operates within the permission of God, which that was a
Hmm.
tough one for me at first. Like, oh man, like what is this,
Hmm.
But God puts this man Job into this test and in this, and he's not testing Job to learn something new, because testing in scripture reveals something that is already true
That's
normally.
right.
It's something that's already true, usually about God or his purposes.
Well, it shows it up for what it is, doesn't it? When you test something.
Hmm. So for me, Job is introducing the concept of the heavenly assembly. He, I believe that it's going to be used in this old Tanakh to inform Israel and all future readers of it. And then that central question that Satan asks, does Job fear God for nothing?
Hmm.
What a question. So, why do you fear God? Why do you revere God? Is it because of fear or is it because you love him or because you,
Substance,
yeah, yeah.
because you get stuff. You're protected.
Hmm.
There's a hedge. Mhm.
Absolutely. So, here's what we learned from Job. At least this is from me, guys.
Mhm.
Spiritual beings can influence human and natural events, which we see elsewhere in scripture, but we also see here in Job. The Satan doesn't create anything, but he does manipulate existing realities like
Exactly. He
people.
uses what's there already.
Hmm. Raiders that come in and attack people or storms, they're secondary causes. They're not
Or fire.
independent forces. So the Satan is using that. God allows, but does not originate that evil. He
Mhm.
allows it. And then Job understands this nuance over time. He actually understands it correctly.
But again, if
So,
God knows everything anyway, he knows it's going to happen like this.
hmm, yeah,
Again, God doesn't have to wait till tomorrow or next year, does he? He's already there.
nope, that's right. That's right.
So he
So,
knows the outcome, he knows the ending from the beginning.
yes, he does. All right. So, here's what, again, I think that the test of Job reveals theologically. And then once I get through this, we'll start the book. Suffering is not always tied to personal sin. That's huge.
It
Suffering is not always tied to
is.
personal sin. We learned that about Job. It had nothing to do with his personal sin. Zero.
No.
Righteousness can be proven under pressure and most likely must be proven under pressure. Um, Evil forces exist, but they are limited by God. God's wisdom surpasses human understanding. That's easy. We've all figured that one out.
And some.
And here's the weird part. The purpose of the book, in my opinion, is not to explain suffering, but to reveal God.
Absolutely.
And that
Absolutely.
is, yes. All right, so let's think about it from the ancient reader perspective. We love audience relevance in the full preterist world, so let's think about that. The ancient reader would have understood the story like this: God is sovereign over all spiritual beings. Testing is a part of a covenant life. If it's in a Tanakh, the covenant people are going to say testing is part of it. Human suffering is complex and not always retributive. God vindicates the righteous eventually, and the world is morally ordered even when it appears chaotic.
Yeah,
Mm,
absolutely.
yes.
100%. And again,
Yes.
it just goes back to all the things that we said. It literally is, with all those things that you have brought up, it has to culminate in the fact that God is sovereign
Hmm.
and nothing is beyond him. Nothing is happens without his say so. Nothing is instigated without him knowing what the outcome is, like I've said. So it's a revelation of God, but it's also what you probably know already. It's like when you speak to a child, which is the whole sort of going all the thing that's going on in Job. That you speak to a child about, say, maybe something they've done, but
Hmm.
gradually over the talking, maybe the hour or something like that, the penny starts to drop as to why you're talking to them about what they may have done, what they may have said, or whatever. And there's
Hmm.
there's a revelation, isn't there, of not
Yes.
necessarily a do and a don't, a can and a can't, a will and a won't, which is how it sort of starts. Really, I've done this and I've done all that and never, and it ends in a deep understanding of something greater. And there's
Yes.
that there's that closeness, then that relationship that takes over when the realization, not only the realization because of if you've had a conversation with a child that you've revealed something and they get it, but also the fact that you can look at that person and say, how much more do I love you for the way that you revealed that to me, because you didn't just basically come out with it at the beginning. You let me go on, and then you started to answer as a parent to a child.
Absolutely. And so I'll wrap up my little bullet point list of things about Job by saying this. This is what I think the story ultimately shows. Number one, Job never learns why he suffered.
No,
Never learns that.
no.
He learns who God actually is. God gives presence rather than explanations in this book.
Yeah.
And the point of Job is the revelation of divine wisdom, not the explanation of human pain and suffering.
Absolutely.
That's an interesting point, especially if people are really, really suffering and they think that God is doing this to them as punishment. Yes,
I think again it goes
we
back
have
to
chastisement at times, but that
exactly, it goes back to Job, he who weeps or persecuted or hated. I mean, at the end of the day, you could apply that today to millions of Christians on this earth. There's loads of Jobs about.
Mhm.
You know, they may be being
Yes.
persecuted, they may be weeping. But again, if you could just like draw on all the things that Job might have said, that you might be saying, why is this happening? Why do you allow that to happen to me? What have I done? I haven't done. And it's funny, really. When I told you my house was flooded about 5 years ago, and I got this. Well, she's died now, bless her. She was 92, but she was
Mhm.
Jewish and used to come to the church.
Mhm.
And obviously, at that age, she was brought up Jewish all her life, went to the synagogue. She still used to go when she went back to. But when my house was flooded, the first thing she said to me was, "What did you do? What have you done wrong?"
Yeah. Punishment by God. What did you do?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what she said to me. What have you done wrong? And I said to her, "Do you really think that there's 90,000 people out there that are suffering because of me?" And she did have to laugh about it. But I just thought, once again, that's that mindset. What have you done wrong?
Mhm.
And but yeah, she was beautiful anyway.
As not too long ago, we were talking about the death of my niece Brianna. And one of the questions that came up to her mother was, why do bad things happen to good people? And her response was so beautiful. She says, well, I've yet to meet a really good person, but bad things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people, but nothing escapes what my father does.
Sees and knows. Absolutely.
And she understood it so well that, and she even got to the point, one of her friends told her, can you thank God even in the midst of this pain and suffering? And you know what? She got to that point. And
Absolutely.
I saw her just a few days ago, and of course, she still misses Brianna, but she understood all of this has a purpose, and God
Good.
knows all things. And he reveals more of himself in those moments. And she said that a lot of the things that used to be cliche to her now mean a lot.
I mean, it's no longer having sympathy, it's now having empathy if you've been there.
Mm-hmm. That's
If you've
good.
never been there, you can offer sympathy. But you've been there, there's empathy.
That's
I
it.
know. I don't like it when people say, "Oh, I know how you must feel." You think, have you lost a child?
Yeah,
No, you don't know how I feel. You can't even imagine it.
right.
So yeah, I mean, I just love her and the family for
Mm-hmm.
really sort of relying on their rock even more.
Yeah, and you know what? That's when we get into the book of Job. And I'm going to ask you, do you have your complete Jewish Bible with you today?
Yes. Do you want me to do you want me to read the introduction to it?
I
Introduction to
do.
Job?
I would love that.
Okay.
Oh, and I was going to say before you start, when we watch what Job goes through, it's kind of like whenever we see a friend who is suffering or somebody who has lost a loved one or whatever it may be with a debilitating disease or something, right? If you listen to Job, you're going to find out everything that Job went through. He's a person that can actually speak from
Yeah.
that position to you, and you can listen. But ultimately, you're going to hear back and forth with his friends, wrestling with the why. What did you
I
do,
know.
Job? We're going to watch all that. You're going to see it play out. And when you do, you're going to recognize it because you've probably went through something similar. Maybe not as harsh as Job, but it's good to see what all this man went through and what he ends
It
up with.
it it probably means a lot more to Brianna's family now, Job,
Oh,
than
yes.
maybe before.
Absolutely.
Because they can
Mhm.
read it knowing that Job lost 10, they've lost one, but they can read the suffering, the pain, and the hurt. And they, like I say, there's times when maybe they would say, why? But really deep down, that is the flesh talking because you miss somebody so much. But the
Hmm.
spirit says, you darling, you know why. I'm
Hmm.
sovereign and I know the best thing to happen at any given time.
You said something just a minute ago. So how many children did Job lose?
10.
Hmm. How many tribes disappeared after the splitting of the nations?
Absolutely. Yeah,
We're
I've
going to
thought
get into
about that.
that later, but
Yeah,
there's a lot of things you're going to find out.
absolutely. Three
What
daughters and seven sons, and they were celebrating the
Yes.
cycle of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
very interesting. Yeah, you got
it
the
is.
feasts.
Hmm.
Absolutely. So, do you want me to read the introduction to Job?
Sure, I'd love that.
Right, it says Job's sudden, unexplained, and unmerited suffering tests his motivation for worshipping God and causes him to question God's justice and rule of the world. Job's friends attempt to defend God, but they do so by offering faulty and simplistic explanations of God's dealings. Their theology is driven by the dogma of divine retribution, which teaches that God rewards the just with prosperity and punishes the wicked with calamity. But it is clear that Job's suffering does not originate in specific sins. Although divine retribution is a general principle of God's dealings, it does not explain all of them. And when not balanced by other operative truths, or when taken to the extreme, it leads to erroneous representations of God's governance. Ivor's perception that he is suffering unjustly causes him to seek a confrontation with God. God does respond to Job's challenge, but rather than Job questioning God, God questions Job. God questions demonstrate that Job lacks knowledge, power, and concern to rule over various parts of God's creation. If Job, because of these deficiencies, is not qualified to rule over less sensitive parts of God's creation, how much more disqualified is he to ascertain how God should rule over humanity? Neither the narrative portions of the book nor the speeches of God reveal why God allows Satan to test Job, except to prove that Job would worship him even in the face of suffering. God does respond to Job's challenge, but God's questions to Job imply that he prefers not to reveal all the reasons for the suffering and that people would not be able to understand all the reasons if they were given. Yet God asserts that the presence of suffering in no way impinges upon the righteous and loving dealings with humanity, which sometimes includes severe suffering. It is perhaps in the tension of this unanswered question where faith is to function.
Mm, that's an excellent introduction to this book.
Yeah, it's
I like
beautiful,
that.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, it is. So why don't we go ahead, since we've already given you guys an introduction to the book, I say let's just jump right in and let's read it and let me see where I want to start from that. So what would be a good starter? Let's see.
I like the fact where it just
Let's
says
do
this.
it let's do 1 through 5. Let's read that.
Shall I read it or you want to?
I would like for you to read it out of the complete Jewish Bible. I say
Okay.
let's stick with that version through this study.
Okay. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. He owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 pairs of oxen, and 500 female donkeys, as well as a great number of servants, so that he was the wealthiest man in the East. It was the
Mm,
custom of his sons to give banquets, each on his set day in his own cycle, in his own house, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. After a cycle of banquets, Job would send for them to come and be consecrated. Then he would get up early in the morning and offer burnt offerings for each of them, because Job said, my sons might have sinned and blasphemed God in their thoughts. This is what Job did every time.
mm. So right out of the gate. So the phrase immediately, a man in the land of Uz, is immediately placing Job outside the land of Israel. And what I've learned is most scholars connect Uz with the regions around Edom, northern Arabia, and Aram, or Aram, however you say it. And the way that they do that is they do it through Lamentations 4, Jeremiah 25, and Genesis 36. But it does not make Job anti-Israel or irrelevant to Israel's scriptures, obviously. It places him inside the larger family world of Genesis, like we were just talking about, the world of
Hmm.
Abraham, Esau, Ishmael, and the desert tribes. So he's not a Hebrew by covenant, but he is a worshiper of God in the wider ancient Near Eastern world. So
Hmm.
that's why I think that this book has been preserved and put in the Tanakh. It's a very important book. Um, but here's what's interesting. You said that he was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil.
Shunned evil.
Here's what's interesting. Those are covenant loaded words. That's like covenant loaded. It's almost like the way we hear Paul when he talks about the Gentiles that do the right things in their heart. It's almost like a law unto themselves. All
Hmm.
right. Because Job is a non-Israelite, so he doesn't have that same covenant. But what we do know is that God has worshipers outside of Israel. That's what we learn about Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, El Shaddai, right?
Yeah.
So this we know it's predating Sinai,
Hmm.
and this moral order is rooted in creation, in my opinion, not just Torah. And
It has to be. I mean, because right at the very beginning, you've got Cain and Abel offering up sacrifices.
mhm,
Where did they get that from? It must have been something that they thought was pleasing to God, because God had obviously sacrificed an animal to cover
mhm,
Adam and Eve.
right,
So therefore, it must have been pleasing to God for them to do that. And the fact that, there was a lamb or an animal taken, and God looked at that one with favor, where something that grew from the ground, he didn't look upon it with favor. So it had to do with, the spilling of blood.
right, right. Now,
So again, for these ones to offer up sacrifices for his children,
mhm,
it's carrying through. They have knowledge, they have understanding, and again, whether it is because God had said something to them or they had observed what God did, then they probably would have thought, well, this is the way to go. This is what God would want for us to cover, because God's covered by, this is why I turn around and say they covered themselves with a fig leaf. That, a fig leaf isn't enough. That's not going to, you can't cover yourself with something that is of the ground. It
right.
has to be something that is alive. And the fact that they knew that, and like you say, the fact that Job understood that, it's got to be pre the law and pre
Yes.
understanding of the nation of Israel, even starting with Abraham.
Hmm. Absolutely. So here's something else. You said seven sons and three daughters, but 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys. Now, I need you all to understand this. This is unheard of for ordinary nomads. This is not the right amount of sheep for ordinary nomads. Back in this time, in that Genesis world, this is royal scale herding. This is big. So he was very rich, obviously. But
Mm-hmm.
by saying royal scale, I'm not saying that he's a king necessarily, but he certainly looks like it. He's definitely a tribal chieftain. He's up there.
Well, it says at the end of verse 3, so that he was the wealthiest man in the East.
Yes. And so there you go. So it's telling you right away that this man, he's loaded. He's
Yeah, and he's
got,
in the East as well. The sun rises in the East.
yeah, which also means when you think about clans and tribes, he's probably thought of as one of the strongest men of the area. When you're running an empire like this, this giant thing like this, you're very strong, not only with your wealth, but you're just a strong person to be able to do this in that world. So he was most likely seen as somebody that was elevated and very strong,
Mm-hmm.
especially among the eastern clans. And again, um, Edom, Zair, Timan, and Arabia, these are filled with these tribal elites, these chiefs, these wealthy pastoral lords that he's falling right in line with the Genesis 25, 30 through 36 world time frame. I definitely see that.
So
Um,
do you think also that around that time frame there was also going to be these other that God had given all the way back there in Genesis 11, that like you can go to, that can be your God,
Mm.
They can be your gods, and now I'm going to be yours. So it mixed in with this. These are these righteous Gentiles that are still in the line of worshipping the true God, rather than following these other alien, which is like this is this these ones that were in heaven in the council that decided that they wanted to go against it, and so God said, right, you can have those nations, but I'm going to start dealing with Abraham. Would you say that that these nations would have still, even though he's dealing with Abraham, would you say that there were still these people, this sort of like tight knit wherever they were, that were
Hmm.
worshipping the true God, even within the realms of these other nations? Then,
I would say so. I would say that the Bible's not so concrete, black and white, that the other peoples that were separated were forced to only worship the one God, that they were there. We know people, their alliances to God change. We see that happen with Israel as time goes by. Their alliances go to other gods. So I think it's safe to say that Job and some of these other people are still worshiping El Shaddai, the
what
God
sort of
of
time,
Abraham.
what sort of time limit would you say? Would you say how long before Abraham, or
No, this is
alongside Abraham?
it's post Abraham. It's after Abraham. I think it's even probably during the time of Isaac or the time of Jacob. I would
Okay.
say with his sons around over there dealing with this, they're dealing with the covenant people. We're reading about this over here, but over here on this side, we also have descendants, like we said, of Abraham and Keturah,
Hmm.
through Midian or through we also see some people related to Esau. So now you've got Esau, who is not a part of that promised line with Jacob and the 12 tribes, but you have this break off of Esau and the Edomites. They're always sort of tracking together through the Bible. If you watch,
They are.
Edom's always around, always doing something. God,
Exactly.
yeah, and God
Exactly.
eventually judges. Matter of fact, King Herod in the time of Christ was an Edomite. He was an Idumean. He was a descendant of Esau, which
Well,
is
that happened
yeah,
sort of like the century before Christ. I think King Hyrcanus, was it, or Hyrcanus?
yeah, John Hyrcanus.
That's
Hmm.
him. Yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
he turned around. He wanted to expel them all,
That's
the
right.
Edomites, but he said
Yep.
that you've got to convert to Judaism, otherwise you're
Hmm.
out. And they said, yes, we'll convert. Well, did they?
Some of them did, some of them did. And you can hear the woman at the well, are you greater than our father Jacob who dug us this well? That's up in Samaria, right? And so some of those people were Edomites that were around there.
But did
Um,
they? Were some of them sort of pretenders? Were some of them
oh, of
still?
course. I
That's
think that it's
exactly.
just like today. I think it's like today,
Exactly, and
you
this is
know?
what I'm saying. It's creeping. It's under, like you say in the New Testament, you've got those that creep in unawares, and they want to sort of spoil everything for you. Were there those that were undermining what was going on at that particular time? Were some of the Pharisees
Hmm.
from that descent?
Absolutely. All right. So the other thing that you read is that each son held a feast in his house on his day.
Yep.
Held a feast in his house on his day. Did you notice that?
Yeah,
Well, scholars interpret this as a birthday celebration.
they do.
Sometimes they say rotating festival days, but because it's on his day, it's like we're having a birthday. So
Absolutely.
it reveals a few things. It reveals a stable, peaceful family economy because they're able to do this openly. It's a culture where adult children have their own households. That's
Mhm.
good. A decentralized patriarchal clan structure. That's what it's showing. But what did you learn about Job? He's offering burnt offerings continually. So he's
Uh,
functioning as the head of this household and a patriarchal priest and the moral guardian of the family. He's the one.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
it's interesting, really, as it says, it was the custom of his sons to give banquets. So obviously, like you say, this is birthdays that they're performing, and then he
Yeah.
says there, and then I've got I've in my Bible, but that's why I keep stumbling here. It's Iyov for Job. So
Hmm.
that's the Jewish way of saying it. So Job would send for them to come and be consecrated. So therefore, after all these sort of, then he would bring them to himself.
Hmm.
They would actually visit him, come to him. So that's quite interesting. I mean, how far they came, I don't know. And why wasn't Job with them when they celebrated their birthdays? You know,
Right. Hmm.
was it just, is there a subtext under there? What's
There
going
is. There is a subtext, and the
exactly?
language, the Hebrew language actually reveals it. Um, First of all, we know with him offering these sacrifices continually. It is, he says to himself, it may be that my children cursed God in their hearts. And so the word that's used is Barak, okay?
It's
And
called, it's what?
Barak,
Oh, Barak.
Barak, like
Yep,
Barack
Barak.
Obama,
Yep.
which means blasphemed or renounced. So he's saying, perhaps my children have renounced God in their heart. They're over here party people. They're party people. They're out there having a blast, getting drunk, having a good time. And he's thinking, oh, how many parents have ever dealt with that with their children? I did. I'll never forget it. Like dealing with my kids, it was like party time, man. And no matter what I said, it went in one ear and out the other. And I remember praying to God, God, please protect my kids. Please let me, you know what I mean? Like that's what a parent does. You love your children, you want them to know God. They don't want to know God. You know, they don't, they want to party it up and live it up. And
Yeah.
it seems like
Oh,
his children were doing just that. They were living, he was wealthy. So we got some rich kids living it up and partying. And
yeah,
Job is a righteous man.
and I think it goes beyond even the law there,
Hmm.
simply because the law was a list of what is required. But here in the Jewish Bible, it says here that my sons might have sinned and blasphemed God in their thoughts. So
Yes,
again,
which,
it reminds you of what Christ said. You know,
mhm.
even if you look at a woman to have it in your thoughts, you've done it.
Hmm.
So it's almost like he's going back to the process of thinking like Job.
Yeah, and you know what? Because he says in their thoughts, that tells you
Yeah,
that Job understands sin at a deep internal level. Not just outward
absolutely.
behavior, not just do not taste, do not touch, but like what Jesus would say, you know, about the inner man. You know,
Yeah,
you're worried about the outward things, but what's going on the inside? Outside,
absolutely.
you're these beautiful whitewashed tombs, but inside, you're dead men's bones. Like he gets to
Absolutely.
the Sermon on the Mount. It's all about digging down deep and getting to the heart of the matter.
Well,
Job understands that.
exactly, and that's the point that I'm trying to make. That it's almost like they're being brought back to something that they should have known by reading Job, which they didn't really take on board because they were more interested in, like I say, the do's and the don'ts. Mustn't do
Hmm.
this and mustn't do that, and yet here in his thoughts. So Christ brings them back to now. We're talking about thoughts here. We're not talking about the actual act. It starts in here, and it talks about
Yep.
in James, is it the desire of like it starts up here, and then you
Hmm.
go back to the Garden of Eden. Before the thoughts were in your head, before somebody put them in there, they weren't there. But the thought starts, doesn't it? It's a bit like
Hmm.
Eve. You know, looked at that tree. Probably Adam looked at that tree for a lot. But as soon as somebody points something out to you, you think, I've never really looked at it like that before.
Hmm.
And that is the thing. You know, you might know a law, you can't go and sleep with that woman or that man because you're married, so are they. So you can think, well, I can't do that. But you might think, well, it'd be nice to, but not me. But do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But some people might think that. Do you know what I mean? But what I'm
Yes.
saying here, he's even gone right back to the origin of where sin would burst forth.
Hmm.
It's your thought process.
Right in the middle, inner man, inner thoughts. That's where it's happening.
Absolutely,
Hmm.
absolutely. So it's almost, this is almost pre-law.
Yes. And okay, here's something else. I'm so glad you brought up thoughts, but also because he is aware of this, when he's like, perhaps my children have renounced God, even in the inside of their thoughts, even like way down deep. But what's amazing, and if you can't see Christ in this, you're never going to. He says, I'm going to take spiritual responsibility for my entire clan, my children and
Absolutely.
all. So
Yeah.
he is going to do the sacrificing for them. Now, it's important to note that Job can't do that. God doesn't have any grandchildren, especially in this era and even now. But right, by saying God doesn't have any grandchildren, I mean that he only has children. You're going to have a personal relationship with God. You're going to have to deal with God. My parents can't deal on my behalf for me with God. I have to be with God. But so Job is definitely going to learn that aspect of it. But it's pointing to Christ because we see that Christ is the one who's going to sacrifice himself for all. He's going to be the one that's going to do that. Only the Son of God can do it. But Job is sort of acting in that role here.
And he's the one that's covering their sin with the sacrifice.
He is, and he's being proactive about it.
But again, it reminds us, like you've just said, about a father and a son. That
Hmm.
he is doing the covering, he is doing the priestly role, he is sacrificing in case there's something incurred in either thought or whatever. So it
Hmm.
reminds you of, it's taking you down those routes of like maybe the seven cycles, the seven feasts.
Hmm.
It's lending itself to going down that route.
Yes. Well, I think, uh, based on timing, before we get into the rest of the chapter, where were we? I think we stopped at 5. Why don't we wait? Why don't we stop the study here and have some closing thoughts? But we're going to get into Satan being allowed to test Job in our next episode, which that rocked me the first time I ever read Job. I was like, what am I reading? What is
I
going
know.
on? What, did you do the same?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, the thing is, you and I have read it many times and for over many years. But yeah, when you first learn that Satan enters before this congregation of the angels in this particular time where God, you just think to yourself, you imagine this great big sort of space with the angels standing and him walking up to God and talking to him and having this sort of conversation about what can I do and what can't I do and will you allow this? You just think, what's going on there?
Yeah. And it's interesting because later on in Jesus's ministry, after he sends out his disciples, the 70, and they go out to start, spreading the gospel, he gives them a list of instructions. And when they come back, they're excited because they've
Yeah.
seen demons responding, to their preaching. And he says, I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning to the earth. And I was like, what is he saying? Does he mean that he saw him right then? Does he mean that he saw him in the past? Like, when is Jesus saying about? Here's the point. Satan was up there. That's what you got to remember. He came from that place down. So
He
when
did.
when he said, I saw him fall, that means that he was up at one point. So it matches Job when Job says he was in the heavenly throne room acting as this accuser. So that's what we're going to get into next week. And I'm very excited to because I can't wait to hear all of your thoughts on this one.
It's just, well, there's so many, isn't there? I mean, you could
Oh,
just
yeah.
spend a lifetime looking at Job. It is so beautiful. And it's like I say, you just read one chapter. And I think if I had all my life to write something like that, I don't think I could. It is far too deep in
Hmm.
its. Yeah, I can't even find the words to describe it. I'm not eloquent enough. But it is
Yeah.
wonderful to know that that it's written there for us to sort of delve into. And as I say, you take sort of like little line, couple of lines of it, and you could just discuss the words and the thought process of what was going through their mind. What did they think about it? How did their thought process pan out? Is it different from ours?
Hmm.
It's all those sorts of things, isn't it?
Yes. And I appreciate you being willing to go through this with me because
Oh,
I really want to look at this book in depth now because since I came to fulfilled eschatology, I haven't actually done a full study of Job since then.
oh,
And I have a pre-version, where I used to think of it. Now I want to look at it through this lens and also try to place it correctly, like where it falls and what God is trying to show in the overall picture of Scripture.
mhm.
Like I don't want to just separate the book from it. I want to see where it lands in the story and how it's being used throughout all of the Scripture.
Absolutely, because it impacts on you and I today, doesn't it?
It
How do we
does.
view things? How do we see things? How do we cope with suffering when it comes our way?
That's right.
It's
And God
easy
does
to.
not change. His attributes, his character, those things remain, and they're there in the book of Job. You're going to
That's
see
right.
some of
And
those
again, it's all about
attributes.
it's all about God's glory, isn't it? Really, at the end of the day, when
Yes.
you go through any trial and you encourage other people when they're trying to encourage you, that really is giving glory to God because you get what it's all about.
Right.
It's not
Absolutely.
about possessions and things. It's about how do you see God and what is He revealing to
Hmm.
you.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yes, it is. So, well, I look forward to next week.
so do
So,
I.
yeah, Elaine, thank you so much for being on this study today. So, this has been Rick and Elaine discuss the Bible. And when we say discuss the Bible, we mean we're going to discuss everything about the Bible.
Exactly.
We're going to go on forever.
Exactly. But I'm not sitting here teaching, and neither are you. You're not sitting here sort of like preaching, and neither. What we're actually doing is discussing thoughts.
Yep.
We're
Hmm.
discussing ideas, and if anybody wants to comment on it, great. But for me, I just find just discussing the whole thing is it's a revelation to me too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it because again,
Absolutely.
it's how different people look at it, and you add little bits to it, and the little puzzle gets fuller and fuller and fuller, and that's
Mm-hmm.
why it's good to talk to each other.
Yes, and that's why we want you guys to understand. It's like we're not teaching you, we're sharing what we're discussing with you.
Yes,
So you
absolutely.
guys, if you hear or know something that we're missing,
Yeah.
we want to discuss it. Like bring it
Yes.
in. Let's talk
Yeah.
about it. So definitely put some comments in there. I have Elaine, I will send you an email. Lori Stone had sent me this giant, like it's like a spreadsheet, and she's got several questions that she wants to ask.
Oh,
And so,
lovely.
yep. And so I'm going to email that to you right after we get out of this meeting, and then give you some time to think about it, and then we'll answer Lori on a separate, like on a separate discussion. We'll talk directly to
Absolutely.
her.
Well, thank you,
Anybody that
Laurie, for
wants to do
that.
that. Yeah.
Thank you, Laurie. I look forward to being enlightened, or maybe just answering what you've written down there and giving my thoughts on it. So, thank you so much for writing them down. Really appreciate it, sister.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. All right. Well, Elaine, you have a wonderful week. And
And you, brother.
yeah, absolutely. So, everybody, God bless, and we'll see you next time.
God bless you. Mwah.
Bye bye.
Iron sharpens iron.